So, Mark, this week you have faced a little bit of backlash in regard to your recent interview that you did with Rasmus Højlund. So we want to explore that a little bit because I feel like people have gone on the negative side. We want to talk about the positives as well. You know, what was he like as a player to interview? You know, he seems like a really sound guy. And do you think loads of people are just a bit jealous that you got this access?
It is a bit of a funny one when you get an interview with someone like Rasmus Højlund. Obviously, it's a real big scoop and pleasure to do that with the United Stand, and it just shows the enormity of its audience and the appeal when you get a player like that. There was huge positivity around it, millions of views, and look, I feel a bit sorry for the player actually and the club on this, because they've done something that's quite innovative. In the sense that, you know, they've allowed us access to do that. We were at Carrington for the day, met the player and the comms team and everybody, and it was a really positive experience. And the interview did really, really well. And it was a few weeks ago that it went out. And then, you know, at the weekend, some made-up story about being, you know, a meltdown in the dressing room because he'd done it and almost behind their back. It's just, it's I know what it is. It's the establishment trying to take something down that's new, basically, and something that's been done in a way that they can't do it. So it's probably fear, to be honest. But look, I look at it. Rasmus was fantastic. You look at Garnacho and Mainu and Rasmus, and I think all three lads have done fantastically in a difficult season, and that's a testament to the personalities that they are. That, you know, I can only speak for Rasmus, but he was just a very impressive young man in relation to his focus and, you know, determination. He gets what Man United's all about, and if he can keep that mentality and that starts to grow in the dressing room at Man United, then truly they could. Obviously going to need a lot of signings from Ineos, but there are the foundations there to build something that can compete with the strong mentality clubs of Liverpool and Manchester City, because there's no doubt that there's been problems at Man United like that for a while. So yeah, I mean, look, Man United are very much a work in progress, but yeah, I can see someone like, I mean, I actually said it to him in the interview, and he wouldn't acknowledge it because obviously he's got leaders in the dressing room. But I said, what you're doing and what you've done in your first season in the Premier League, I can see a future leader / captain of Man United and Denmark there. But I mean, that's just me saying that, and there's a long way to go before that happens.
And do you think you're going to be invited back to Carrington to do an interview with any other players anytime soon?
Maybe not. I mean, obviously it's caused a lot of trouble. But having said that, the positive side of it was that so many people watched it, so many people liked it, and with the exception of probably one or two outlets, you know, talkSPORT, to be fair, might be one of those. Let's give them a shout out. There's not many that can hit that sort of an audience in that way, and the written media know that, and I think that's why they're struggling with it. I think if I was a Man United player, I would be looking to do it. I really would, because the positivity around that was massive for the club, for the player, and I think they should be looking to do more of it. And I thought it was really well done. And obviously, you can't just put any old question in there. It was done professionally. It was planned in advance. We were at Carrington for the day, so yeah, I think they should be doing more of it. I think it's a bit, you know, silly not to, but we'll see.
And now I want to get your thoughts on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who was recently on Gary Neville's The Overlap. He had some interesting stuff to say, especially about transfers that Manchester United missed out on, about Bellingham, about Haaland, Declan Rice, always the ones that got away. I just want to get your thoughts on this. And also the funny comment he said about Fred, where Roy Keane had to check out his drink and see if he was drinking something else.
I thought it was a brilliant interview with Solskjaer, because I think it encapsulated the strength of Solskjaer and the weakness. You know, his blind loyalty to players that weren't good enough, like the Fred comment when Roy Keane did sort of smell the drink, because it's true. You know, he spoke glowingly about people like Fred, and ultimately they're not good enough to take Man United to titles. So there it exposes the naivety of Solskjaer as a coach. I don't think he's a very good coach, to be honest. But what a guy, and he is a legend of the club, and he comes across as, you know, what we always knew. It was a massive guilt thing in the fan base to turn on Ollie and say he needed to go, because he's loved so much. But, you know, you got to be cruel to be kind. He wasn't good enough. But there was also some interesting stuff as well. I mean, he spoke about, you know, I mean, there's been all sorts of speculation about what those players were, but he spoke about players not really standing up, downing tools, not wanting the captaincy. I think that's always really interesting, especially when that's clearly a problem at United now. You know, the inconsistency, I believe, comes from a lack of mentality in the dressing room with some players. But the signings, again, is brilliant, because we've got a manager who's struggled with that. We've got Mourinho who's struggled with that. So when Solskjaer comes out and says, look, I wanted Bellingham, I wanted Haaland, I told them about Haaland and they didn't do it, and you see what's happened with, I mean, the Haaland one's ridiculous. I think he said 2 or 3 times, twice before he even came to the club, go and buy him. Then he comes to the club and says that he's got a release clause, and the club ignore it, and then he's doing what he's doing. I mean, it's not a surprise, but it's always good to be reminded. So I thought it was a really good interview with Solskjaer.
And do you think it's a bit of PR maybe to say, well, you know, I did try, but he's sort of like throwing the Glazers under the bus? Is it sort of getting those United faithful fans back on side?
I don't think Solskjaer will lose the faithful fans, but I think that you're right. I think that there are still some people, even with the Ten Hag debate, there will still be some United fans who say bring back Ollie, which is just incredible. I mean, that's just complete and utter nonsense, and it's red tinted glasses ignoring the past. I think managers normally sign these agreements that they can't say anything for at least 18 months. So Solskjaer's obviously out of that now, and look. In a different circumstances, yes, I think it's completely about making himself look good so he can get a job elsewhere. But in these circumstances, as a United fan, I'm quite glad because it just exposes the massive problems, especially when we've got another manager under fire. I think Solskjaer coming out and telling the problems that he had there and knowing that they're still there, it just highlights to United fans the enormity of the job and the massive amount of problems that have gone on over the last few years behind the scenes that make managing that club really hard, no matter how good you are.
And speaking of massive problems maybe being resolved, Jadon Sancho reportedly set to stay at Dortmund in the summer. We've had a lot of conversations about this, how, bit of a wasted talent, but is this a good end to the saga, and how would you really sum up his time at the club?
I think Jadon Sancho has to go down as a flop, and that's always a hard word to use, but he does. I mean, this is a player we spent 2 summers trying to sign. I was really excited about it. I mean, a fantastic CV at Dortmund. Lots of people were like, he's only not getting picked by Southgate because he's playing in the Bundesliga. And to be honest with you, he completely and utterly failed in the Premier League. There's been flashes, but that's not good enough. You look at what people like Phil Foden and Saka are doing. He shouldn't be starting for England. I had this opportunity to come into the Premier League on a big transfer fee and wages and a big club. And he's failed. And there's been a lot of stuff about blaming Ten Hag. Well, Ten Hag wasn't there when he was bought. He was with Solskjaer for a year. First 3 months of Ten Hag's reign, he let him go off and deal with the issues that he had. I think he's been well looked after at Manchester United. And he's just another Memphis Depay, Di Maria, Schneiderlin, every other Man United player that's failed. I mean, he's not in an exclusive club. There's a lot of players that fail at all sorts of clubs. And I think Jadon Sancho just needs to look in the mirror, look at why he's failed, and try and rescue his career because he's a really talented player, but not at Manchester United. I think the bridges are burnt. Obviously, we saw with the tweet last year, he's not somebody that's going to take on responsibility. And I suppose that's the key, really. I wish him all the best in what he does. He does need to leave, but we need players that look in the mirror and take on responsibility. And I just don't think Jadon Sancho's done that. So I wish him all the best, and I think he needs to move on.